Hello, I'm Carol Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. And today, it's just us, you and me, because I have a couple things to say. First of all, for over 20 years, I have loved writing for you in every local paper we had. The Record, remember the Record? The Edge, the Eagle, and I'm going to do it again. But for the summer, there are going to be no Carol Owens columns. But it's good news. I got 2 book contracts, and I'll tell you a little bit about what they are, and a third one that I hope to sell, and they have to be finished, and I can't do it all. Usually I write 102 columns a year, plus Stockbridge Updates, and I can't do the columns, Stockbridge Updates, and 2 books. Now, the 2 that are coming out, one is on Elm Court, and the other is on Lennox in the Gilded Age, and the third, which is Finding a Home, is on the origin of Tanglewood. Not the whole history of Tanglewood, not Tanglewood today, but the origin of Tanglewood, which is a fun and fascinating story. So that's what I'll be doing with my summer, and I will miss you. I will miss writing the columns for you. But Stockbridge Updates will carry on, and the books hopefully will come out, and in fall, everything will be back to normal. In the meanwhile, if I were writing the column, I'll tell you a couple things I've been thinking about. We had a town meeting in Stockbridge the other day, and there was a hot button issue. There's always one, and this time it had to do with how we're going to control development. And just the week prior, the special permit had been granted to DeSisto. And the good news was almost 270 acres were put into conservation, and only 27 acres were being developed. But I tell you, it's amazing what you can do with 27 acres. They're putting in 133 hotel residences. They're putting in parking for 500 to 600 cars. They're putting in a swimming pool. They're putting in 23 single-family units and 4 townhouses. And in addition, they have some of the 27 acres, or in addition to the 27 acres, a few more acres set aside for temporary activities like glamping or outdoor picnicking, perhaps trail walking, perhaps horseback riding, things that are not permanent structures as a house would be. So think about all that you can do on 27 acres. So the hot button issue at town meeting was what happens to 35 acres. So now there's a piece, also in Interlaken, of 35 acres, and a developer had made an offer of $600,000 on those little humble Stockbridge acres. And so it was pretty clear with a price tag like that he was going to develop. And the question is, gosh almighty, if we let it go to him, how much can he build? That'd be a lot of building in the little, they used to call Interlaken and Glendale the suburbs of Stockbridge. It was a kind of a joke, and I thought it was very funny. But the question is, how much building do you want in one of the little suburbs of Stockbridge? Anyway, it went down. We did not use our right of first refusal to purchase. We allowed it to be sold to the developer. That was the will of the people, and that's fine. That's good. What troubled me kind of combines the things that I usually write about in a column, that is national politics, and local politics. Because there was a lot of fiddling and fidaddling, as my granny used to say, at that meeting. There was a kind of plain rudeness, embarrassing someone who stood up to speak, which I found very uncomfortable. And there was a kind of switcheroo in the rules. Was it a simple majority if it would pass, or was it a 2/3 majority? May I interject? The issue lost by 2/3. So whether a simple majority or a 2/3 majority was required, that article in the warrant would have gone down either way. The question is just about how do we correct factual misstatements in the course of a meeting? Whose responsibility is that? And exactly how do we do that? Because there was a very robust turnout for town meeting. I was quite pleased. It was a low percentage of all the voters in town, but it always is. It was a higher percentage than sometimes it usually is. So looking at the positive side. But you've got a representation of the voters there. They are going to exercise their responsibility. How do we make sure they're getting accurate information? How do we make sure that no matter how strongly we feel about the issue, no matter how hot that hot button is, that we continue to be polite, just old-fashioned nice to one another? And what that got me thinking about is columns that I've written for the last couple of years about national politics, and my fear that some of the nastiness on the national level will trickle down. The name-calling, the assumption that someone who disagrees with you is your enemy, things that interfere with a robust discussion where people disagree with respect, where people separate the opinions different folks are holding from the value of the human being himself. And I hope that we won't let that trickle down into our little community. And I'm hurt when someone says, well, town meeting is for the locals, not those second homeowners. Folks, 40 to 50% of the population of Stockbridge is now second homeowners. We've got to find a way to be one village, not two. It's just one example. Okay, moving on to what the books are about. I put a little article in the Berkshire Eagle on Monday, or rather my editors did. I was pleased that they placed my article. It explains about that being a last article until fall. And I wanted to interject into this pretty negative and pretty noisy national conversation. I wanted to interject into that something happy, something uplifting. And what I did was I told stories of 4 people whom I really respect, who've accomplished a lot in their lives. And I said because they had developed their own values, not money, not beating the other guy, not he who has the most in the end wins, but developing their own personal goals for what they want to accomplish in their life. And I'll tell you 2 of them. To read all 4, buy a Berkshire Eagle. But 2 of them are this. I have a 75-year-old male friend, darling. He's been a friend for many years now. And years ago, 50 years ago, a woman invited him to come. She lived in another state. And in the end, he didn't go. And he never saw her again. And you know what? 50 years later, he told me, I don't know why I didn't go. I don't know why. But he realized something else entirely. He realized it was the biggest mistake of his life. 50 years on, he had never forgotten this woman. He had never let go of the feeling of warmth and affection for her. And while he didn't know why he didn't go, couldn't figure that one out, he did know he was really sad about it. And there he was at 75 years old. And he asked me if he should try and get in touch with her again. And I said, absolutely. And it was back and forth and back for weeks and weeks. How would he find her? What if she was married? What if she didn't want to see him? I don't know, all the what ifs. And finally he called her. And one of the things she shared with him is back in the day, he was the love of her life too. Now, how will that potential love story end? I don't know. But isn't it great at 75 that he was still pursuing love, by gosh, like a cavalier? So that was one of the stories. And another is an excerpt from my book, the book on Tanglewood, on the origins of Tanglewood. And it tells the story of Joseph Franz, but more pointedly, it tells the story of his daughters, who are today still living, and one still lives in Stockbridge, and they are in their 90s. And Joseph Franz was the man who built the shed, our beloved shed. And this tells the story of maybe why you've never heard his name, why it's called the shed, and the sadness that his daughters felt that he had never been acknowledged, that in fact you don't know his name. And the question was, would Tanglewood acknowledge Joseph Franz? This year, they were asked by Patrick White, who knew the story from me, who wrote it in my book, which I hope you will all be able to see and read by the end of the year. So we'll see what happens. And it's all very exciting. These are people who are in their 90s and their 80s and in their 70s who are still vibrant. They're still reaching out for goals. And in some cases, read the article, they're getting them accomplished. And I think that's the kind of really happy news that we need right now in these somewhat depressing times. There is a way to live well. And I wish all of you well. This is an abbreviated Stockbridge Updates, but I just wanted to bring you up to date. Signing out, Carol Owens.